This is Chapter 3 Selections, Programming Exercise 4, Random Month. So we're going to write a program that randomly generates an integer between 1 and 12 and display the English month named January, February, all the way to December for the numbers 1, 2, all the way to 12 accordingly. So of course 1 is for January, 2 is for February, 12 for December. So how are we going to generate number between 1 to 12? Well, we're going to use a class called random to do it. This random class has a method called nextInt, and that's what we're going to use. All right, we're going to create a random number generator with the random class, and we're going to use a method called nextInt. All right, so let's see, method nextInt, nextInt right here. All right, so let's just simply read what this nextInt does. All right, in this case, we won't be using this particular nextInt method, but this one instead. Now, all of this might seem a little bit confusing with what's going on in here, but don't worry. Just understand how to use it for now, and then we'll understand how it works later on. This is just a small intro on how to use this method from the random class, this nextInt method. So this nextInt method returns a pseudo-random, not exactly 100% random, it's not 100% random, pseudo-random. You give it a number and it kind of randomly generates a number, right? Unily distributed int, so it takes in an integer, right? Integer n, so any integer could be here, and of course integer has a set size, right? Value between 0 inclusive and the specified value exclusive, drawn from this random number generator sequence. The general contract of nextInt is that one int value is the specified range is pseudo-randomly generated and returned. So what it means is that it takes a number, you give it a number, and it will generate a number between 0 and up to that number. So for example, let's say you pass 10 to it. If you pass 10 to this method, then it will generate a number between 0 to 9, but it's not going to ever generate that 10. All right, so does that make sense? So let's say it says all n possible int values are produced with approximately equal probability. So if you put in a 10, then a number between 0 to 9 all have an equal probability of being randomly or pseudo-randomly generated and outputted to you. So between 0 to 9, that's 10 possible number, and since each have an equal probability of being outputted, that's 10% for each number that will output. All right, so let's not go too deep into it. It's not important, too important for now to know all of this right here. You just have to have a basic understanding of how to use the nextInt, which I will try my best to show you in this video. All right. So let's say I create a variable called random number generator from the random class, and then I use the dot operator to access the random class method. In this case, I want to access the nextInt method that takes in a number, a parameter, an integer parameter. In this case, it will be 12. Now, the issue that we have with this right here is that if I enter 12, there is a possibility that it will generate any number between 0 to 11. But I don't want it to generate a 0. I want it to generate any number between 1 to 12. So if I put 13, it'll definitely generate a number between 1 to 12, but also the number 0. So actually, before I continue, why don't I show you an example? So let me create this random, and we'll just call this variable that I'm going to create random number generator, right? The random class, I'm using the random class and I'm creating a variable for this random class equals new random. So I instantiate a new random class out of this. Now, why don't I do a system.out.print line? And I guess I would like to print this out 12 times. And let's see what number I get. Now, like I've said before, random number generator is just a variable to access this new random class that I created. To access the method, you could simply put the dot operator and all its non-private methods will show. Now, of course, right here, next int is the most popular, and it's showing because Intellij knows that this method here is the most popular use, and not for any other reason, right? It's the most popular, and it just puts it to the top for us. Now, in this case, it wants us to have a seed. It's not necessary, right? There is a next int method that doesn't take in a parameter, but the one that we want to use does, and it's called a bound that we want to set. In this case, the bound that we want to set is 12. So let's try to run this 12 times. That's 2, 3. To make it easier, just print this out. 1, 2, 3, 4. So that's 12. And if we were to run this class, let's see what appears. So what appears should be any number between 0 to 12. Right, so I can't pull that. All right, so let's take a look. As we can see, it's actually, sorry, did I say 0 to 12? I meant to say 0 to 11. All right, the upper limit is it goes up to 11, but never 12. Any number between 0 and n minus 1. So as you can see, if we run this, we don't see 12 at all. And to show you, no matter how many times I run this, you will never see 12 right here. You see only numbers between 0 to 11 and never 12. Now the thing is, we want numbers to generate between 1 to 12, and we don't want the 0. So there's a simple, very easy solution for this. By simply adding 1, you just made it that we will now only get numbers between between 1 to 12. All right. So once again, we will have this ran. I'll run, right? And now we will never get any number that's 0 because we add a 1. So if a 0 does appear, it'll add a 1 to it. And now it becomes a 1. If 11 appears, we add a 1 to it, it becomes a 12. And now this ensures that we will always get a number that's randomly generated between 1 to 12. And as you can see right here, almost all the numbers appear. So the only number I probably don't see is 9, 10, and 11. But they all have an equal chance of being randomly generated. All right. In this case, we see that 9. We don't see a 10 or 12, which is fine. But just understand how this next int method works, and you will have a really clear understanding on how to do this exercise. So hopefully this case is clear enough for us to continue on to our next task. Now, let's understand why we want to generate any number between 1 to 12. Simply, it's because we want to associate that number with the particular month. 1 is for January, 2 is for February, 3 for March, 4 for April, 5 for May, 6 for June, 7 for July, 8 for August, 9 for September, 10 for October, 11 for November, and finally 12 for December. Now, what we want to do is to randomly generate any number between 1 to 12, so then we could pop and say, hey, this is if we generate a 3, oh, March, generate 10, output October, generate 6, that's June, right? That's basically all we want. So with that, how do we do this? What's a really nice way to do this? Now, to do this, a really simple and easy way to do this is by using the switch case. Now, what is the switch case? Well, time to show you, right? What we're gonna do is write the switch case right here. So this right here, I'm just gonna leave it. I'm gonna just have it generate some random number. But what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna pass that number to this variable right here called number. And random number dot next int, let's put 12 plus 1. And this will ensure that we will get a random number between 1 to 12. All right, and any number appears between 1 to 12 will be equally will have an equal chance of appearing. And with that, we're going to create a switch case, and this switch case, what it simply does is we're going to pass this number here into here, and it's going to take this number and it's going to go through everything within this parentheses. Now let's take a look. What we have here is the switch case, the random number that we put in, and all the possible case that we could put. So it could be anywhere from case 1 to case 12. So let's give that a go. Let's start with case, and I'm expecting 1. And if I see a 1, what I'm going to do is I'm going to print out January. And if that's all I'm expecting, then I'm also going to put a default case. Default case will be, let's call it December. Now, why am I doing this? Why I don't write out all the case? Because I want to show you how this works first and how the default works. So let's start from the top. What I did right here is to create an instance of the random class. That way I could use this instance to access a method inside the random class. The random class contains a method called nextInt, which takes in a parameter. And it's going to use that parameter to generate a number that has from 0 up to that bound. In this case, the number that I put in is 12. So normally it would generate any number between 0 to 11. But I want a number between 1 to 12. To do that, I add a 1 to whatever number I generate. So I generate a number and I add a 1 to it. So if I generate a number 5 in here, it will now become 6, and that 6 is now stored to this variable called number. This number is then passed to this switch case that I have here. This switch case takes that number and then it compares it to all the possible cases in here. So it say, hey, number is 6. Is 6 a 1? If 6 is a 1, then print this statement right here. If it's not a 1, go to the next line and compare. Now in the next line, it doesn't see any more cases. So therefore, it will go to the default. Now the default says if none of the case match, then print this. So here we go. Let's run that, and what do we get? Well, chances are there's a 10%, no, less than 10% chance that a 1 will appear. And since that didn't appear, it now shows December. Now, what happens if I get rid of the default case? If I get rid of the default case, I pass in a number and it doesn't match any of the number, what will happen? Well, when that happens, it'll ignore everything that inside this switch, inside these parentheses. It'll continue, it'll go on, it'll see nothing, and it'll finish the code. That's it. So what I'm trying to say is it doesn't need a default case. If you don't have a default case, that's okay. You don't have to have it, right? Now, another scenario that people might worry about is, what if I put the default case on top? That's the very first thing I do. What will happen? Well, that's the thing about this switch, right? This switch function in Java. This little ability, this thing here has the ability to know that this default here will be the last thing it checks, the last thing it goes to before it does anything else. So in fact, if I pass a number here and it sees default, it won't just default and print December. In fact, it will just check for this case right here, and if it sees that this case isn't true, if this number is 6 and 6 is not 1, it'll ignore this, then it'll check the entire thing. Hey, was there a default here? If there was, then print it. So to make that easier to visualize, let me do a few more and then run it. Now, another scenario that I have just bounced into is, well, what happened if the case matches? Right here, the first two cases actually has 1 in it. So what happened is Java knows, hey, you can't do that. You can't have 2 matching or duplicate label, as they call it. It won't work. It can't say, oh, this is a 1. If this number was a 1 and this is a 1, and it will print this. But then also sees another 1, now it gets confused. So you can't have duplicate. Make sure to remove your duplicate, and that will resolve the issue. Alright, so let's see. Right here's 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, and 12. Of course, let me fix this too. So there is, I don't actually need 12. And I don't need 12 is because, actually, let me just leave that there for now, and I'll show you why in a bit. So January, February, March, April, May, June, July, August, September, October, November, December. Now, by default, I actually have the default if I don't enter this, right? Say I don't enter this, and it check 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, and there are actually 12 months in a year, and it doesn't see that 12, I could by default say, hey, it's December. But I don't have to do that. I could just have the whole thing have all 12 matching case. So if in that scenario, you could just say, there shouldn't be more than 12 months, exclamation mark. Now in this case, with this scenario that I have, this tight code that I have, this default case should never appear. So if I run it many times, no matter how many times I run it, this default case should never appear. Now it's weird that I have September, October, November, and December appear. So what's going on? Now let's see. What's going on is that it sees that it says it's September, right? So that means I actually generate a 9. So what happens is after it generates a 9, it doesn't know what to do. It sees all these other things here, and it also generated it too. So what you gotta do in this case is to add a break. So actually, before I do that, I want to actually show you what I mean. So the number generated is, put number here. In this case, run that, and we'll see the number generated is 8. Now 8, it goes in here and it takes a look at everything. Are you 8? No, you're not 8. You're not 8. You're 8. Oh, 8 is right here. I'm going to print this out. System.out.println August. Bam, got it, August. Now, why did it print out September, October, all the way to the end? Well, it doesn't know what to do after a word. You print it out and it will say, I see all these print out statement right here, and I already mashed it, so you know what, I'm going to print it all out too. But we don't want that, and that's where we add our third thing, and that's called break. Break means, okay, you're done here. You don't need to do anything else after you figure out what to do here. So break out of this switch statement. And in this case, I'm going to run it first before I try to explain any further. All right. I'm going to run that. And this time it generates a 12 and it shows December. So that isn't really that good, right? Because there's really nothing after that. So let me try running that again. Bam, August again. So this time it just generates August, right? It just print out August and it doesn't print out September, October, November, and December. Why is that the case? Well, what it sees is that first it matches the number 8 with this case, this 8 right here. And then it prints out this print line method with whatever strings inside, and it goes to the next line and see what it has to do next, and it sees break. So what break does is, okay, so you're telling me that you're done with the code within this curly braces, right? This curly braces here. So what I'm going to do is, after I see this break, I'm going to jump out of this curly braces and I'm going to continue on with whatever code after the break here, right? So that's exactly what it does. It continues on to code whatever the break, whatever is after this curly braces here. But since there's nothing here, it doesn't do anything, and it'll just say, okay, I'm done with the code. All right. So that's what break does, and it is important to use it if you need to use it. All right. And of course, I would like to put a break here too. Now it's dangerous to not put a break here and put the default case all the way up here. So let me show you why. If you're going to put the default case all the way up here, make sure to put a break. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to try to put 15. Let's see if I could get any number, get that to appear. Number generates 2. Let's try a few more times. If not, I'm going to increase a number and make it just a little bit bigger. All right, and bam. Now, as you can see, if the number generates 14, 14 doesn't match any of these numbers right here. So what it does, it instantly goes back to the top and goes to the default. Now the default says, hey, I want to print out this. There shouldn't be more numbers, more than 12 months in a year, right? In a year, right? And if it is, print this out because you, or I mean me, or you, whoever, is having a bound that shouldn't be there. The bound should only be 12, right? But I put 15, and now there's a possibility that the number 13, 14, and 15 will appear. And those aren't months in the year. In this case, it'll go to the default, it'll print this out, and then it'll go to the next line. And then when it goes to the next line, it prints out January. And then it sees the break and it jumps out of this curly braces to go on to the next code. Now, simply if you don't want to put break, all you really have to do is put it at the bottom of the code. All right, bottom of the code. And if you do that, you could avoid having all of this. But in this case, what if you do want to print out the first case because you head into default? Well, if that's the case, then you put it in the top, or you put it between other cases, whatever your code may be. I don't want to say don't ever do certain things, because you may come up with a brilliant design that that you really require the default to be between one of these cases for whatever scenario that comes up for you. In that case, go ahead and do that. Use the break, you don't use the break. Just make sure that whatever you're doing, it is intentional and you expect that to happen. If you don't expect that to happen, then check your code again. All right? So that is pretty much it for this exercise.